Hello, and welcome to the 2020 Western Horn Festival online edition. I'm your host, Jena Gardner, and I teach at Western Illinois University. If you're just tuning in, welcome, and be sure to check out the previous sessions, which will all be available after broadcast. This next session was recorded last week with Western Illinois University's instrument repair specialist, Chad Walker. Chad will give us all insight into the best practices for maintaining our instruments for the best playability. Enjoy. Could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your background in music and in repair work?
Sure. So I am Chad Walker. I have a degree from the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire in music. After I did that, I moved on to a place called Badger State Repair, which is in Elkhorn, Wisconsin. So in instrument repair you have, or in the instrument world, you've got Elkhart, Indiana, and Elkhorn, Wisconsin. So where I did my training was literally right down the street from the old Holton factory, but when I was there, it actually existed, as you can tell from the grayness of my beard, it was there. So at this place, this was an overhaul shop. So if the sousaphone got run over by the bus, it would get sent to the music store, and the music store would send it up to Badger State Repair. And then I paid them a fair sum of money to work along with each of the guys.
Okay, like as an apprentice sort of a style?
As an apprentice. But up there, person only knows one job. So you've only got a dent person, you've only got an assembly person, you've only got a solder person, and so I would work with each of them. And based on numbers, then I would move on to the next thing. It was just based on repetition and numbers. So I literally have no notes. I just learn everything by repetition.
Yeah, so, it's not that different than how we learn as performers, you know, side by side with our teachers and our colleagues, that kind of thing.
It really clicked for me. I was never great in group settings in college. It was never the best way for me to learn. I always was in the situation where I felt like somebody else understood it, and then I could panicky. And in my situation, I could, whenever I wanted to, I could go up and ask the person for the question, assuming it was a break time or lunchtime. But anything other than that, I could go right up and always ask the exact question.
That's awesome. So what was your music degree in? What instrument?
Well, I started off as a music education, and I can move my way around in any of the woodwinds. You don't want to hear me play too many of the brass instruments. I decided that music education wasn't for me. I looked into programs about my sophomore or junior year, convinced my parents that I should drop out of college, and they convinced me to finish my degree, and then I moved on to Badger State.
I see. Okay.
So I literally have music liberal arts is my degree.
Okay.
It was the quickest way I could finish my degree, switching from education. So that's
okay.
And then I went to work for the music shop out of Champaign. I quickly became the manager there because the person that hired me moved away, and I was doing between like 40 and 60 horns a week. It was a crazy
wow
situation. Yeah. So
great. Well, that's really interesting, and obviously you have a lot of experience in this area. So obviously the point of this session is for horn players, so you know, general things are great too, but can you talk to us a little bit about the basics of horn maintenance, like the sort of everyday things that horn players need to do or know about in order to maintain their instruments?
Sure. My new idea on all of this is basically comes down to one most important thing, and this doesn't matter what instrument you're playing. Rinse your mouth before you play. That's it. If you could have some form of water supply or mouthwash or something to clean out lunch and dinner and breakfast from your mouth first, then that will get into your instrument. And specifically with the horn, the whole instrument is enclosed. The rotors are enclosed. A trumpet player gets to pull out their valve and oil it down. It's always enclosed. It's always circulating. So whatever you put in there either dries up or stays in there. And it very rarely makes its way out the bell. Sometimes out your spit valve if you have one. And sometimes your slides when you dump it out. But number one is rinsing your mouth. With do wonders for everything.
Okay.
So I'm going to grab a horn here, and we'll kind of talk about some of the other stuff.
Okay.
So this is Grace's horn. This is a Holton that we've got here. So tuning slide grease would be one of the first things we want to talk about. It's different from slide grease on a trombone, but it is generally a lanolin-based product. I don't have the lid on this one, but a lot of people probably know it as the little Schilke stuff that you can buy in this little thing, right? I love this stuff.
Yeah, that's what I use as well.
Yeah, I just don't like the price. Everything is, well, not everything. Most slide greases, like the Schilke, are lanolin based. So I buy a big tub of it like this. And
okay.
It's anhydrous lanolin, not hydrous lanolin. And it would last the normal horn player 3 lifetimes.
And you just use that straight, or do you make some kind of concoction?
Depending upon what we need it for. If it's just a regular tuning slide here, I try and use it straight because the thicker it is, the longer it's going to last. Okay. The only thing, I will also sometimes thin it out with a little bit of valve oil or rotor oil, L-Cas, one of those things.
Okay.
If you need it to be thinner. Heat and this don't get along. So if you left this in your car and your car is hot and you left your horn like this, I mean, little by little, it's all working its way down into the cases.
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Some people prefer other types of slide grease that doesn't break down because they think it lasts forever and they like that. And that's one school of thought. My school of thought is I like it that it breaks down because everything is eventually going into the casings, and I know that it will mix with the valve oil, it will thin out, and it will work its way through.
And by casings, you're talking about the casings around the rotor.
Yeah,
valve,
so the rotor,
right?
so the rotor casing, so the rotor here sits inside of the casing. So just anywhere around the rotor works its way down in there.
Right.
I prefer lanolin based. Lanolin it comes from sheep. It's in every makeup cosmetic product. And for the most part, that's what every manufacturer uses.
Okay. So what about, like, I remember when I was in high school, I had I think it was Yamaha or Holton, and it was red and kind of like this like gooey red stuff.
That gooey stuff. Yeah. And there, I think that stuff was Holton, or it might have been Selmer for a while.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what that is. There are people out there that really like that stuff. John Huth up at Red Wing, he's a great brass tech, and he loves that stuff for the idea that it doesn't break down. I'm just worried about what happens when it works its way into the room.
Right.
That's my biggest thing. And the other thing that we got to think about is if we do have our slide grease on, and if we're taking our slides and then we're setting our slides down onto something, everything that was on my bench here is now on this slide. And then when I take that slide and I put it back in, everything is then into the tube. And like I said, eventually,
right, it gets grit and dirt
all
in
that
there.
Grit and all that, everything is heading in that direction.
So how often should a meticulous student grease their tuning slides on the horn?
I guess a lot of it is dependent upon how often they're moving it, what the temperature is that the instrument is stored in. I would say once a week would be fine. Possibly once every 2 to 3 weeks would be fine. The worst problem is when we let it sit for extended periods of time. And that's why slides get stuck. There's really only 2 reasons for why a slide gets stuck. Either the tube here was dented, and then the slide is pushed in, and then now you've got a situation where you can't pull it out, or the slide grease, and this would go why some people prefer the grease not to break down. the slide grease broke down, lunch, dinner, and breakfast attached itself to the tube, and it literally will freeze itself into place. If there is grease there, even if there's oil there, it will not freeze into place.
Okay. What about, so you mentioned heat. So what if you're playing an outdoor concert or you're in marching band and it's really hot day? Is that going to be a problem with a lanolin-based slide grease?
It is, just to the point that you're going to have to remember to reapply it more often than you would if it was a normal temperature. Just because it literally thins out from the heat, and gravity will move it wherever gravity is going to take it. Okay, which might be away from the slide.
A lot of times when I meet students and mess around with their instruments, I'll say, can you pull out this slide or push in this slide? And their slides just like, they won't move.
Yeah.
That obviously comes from a lack of keeping them well greased. But beyond the ability to move, what is the purpose in greasing the slides?
Obviously, in order to remove the slides so that you can tune the instrument, remove the slides so that you can remove saliva, and just so it doesn't freeze in place. That's it. Otherwise, it will. It will freeze in place.
One other thing, I guess it was a leading question, so I should have just said what I wanted to say, which is that the grease also seals gaps in the instrument, right?
Absolutely.
So air leakage, anytime air is leaking from any little spot in the horn, that's going to make us have to work harder here, and the instrument's not going to resonate as well. So keeping them well greased on a regular basis is important for that too.
Absolutely. And if you're leaking that much air, you should probably consider taking it to a repair technician and have them adjust the slide tubes. But it definitely will fill gaps anywhere where you're leaking air. And the bigger the gap, the thicker you want your grease. So that, it's kind of that simple.
So that's really great and very helpful to know that maybe once a week would be an ideal amount to grease the slides. So what about oiling the valves? Can you talk about where horn players should put valve oil? Because I think that sometimes that's a misconception.
It gets confusing, and it's not that easy as opposed to a trumpet player, because there's really
Oh, I'm sorry. Will you repeat what you just said, because my internet connection seems to be struggling a little bit.
We have 3 places that we need to oil for a horn, and it's kind of important. There's different types of oils out there. There's synthetic oils, there's regular oils. A lot of that comes down to player preference. There are schools of thought that think synthetic oils don't dry out as fast, which would be an advantage of some ways.
Meaning like they don't evaporate the same way?
They don't evaporate as fast. It would stick around for a lot longer. I will say this, pick an oil that you like, stick with it, and for the most part, somebody can take this too wrong, but any type of oil is better than no oil at all. Okay, some form of lubrication is better.
Right.
So we can call this a rotor, we can call this a piston, we can call it whatever we want. I tend to call it a rotor because it rotates. We've got the rotor body here, which we need to have a type of oil, and generally we use a rotor oil or we use a Alcas or something like this so that we get it.
A very light viscosity, right?
Yeah. It really shouldn't be touching here at all inside the instrument. It actually spins on the spindles. So there's a spindle here and there's a spindle here, and it's not touching here. So depending upon the player, depending on how you like it, we like to recommend a spindle oil on the spindles and a little bit thinner oil on the body of the rotor. This is all player dependent, depending on how you like it.
Okay. Let's say I'm a basic, I'm just a junior in high school and I've got one kind of oil.
Yes, then I would go for I would go for like a medium weight oil, and that's what this Hetman stuff is. A medium weight because it would stick around longer, and you just don't have to be as concerned about oiling it all the time, like we said about it. So if it was in the instrument, let's come up with another example, because this is where it gets complicated. Go like this one here. So we've kind of got this part of the horn.
It's like a Frankenstein.
So this is a little Yamaha 313. It's probably the instrument, single horn. Everybody, I mean, most people probably almost learned on this in today's world. So when the rotor sits inside the instrument, okay, it sits inside like this. Okay, so we understand what we're looking at here. And so it would look like this up inside the instrument. So these are the spindles. How do we get to the spindles? We can get to the back spindle here.
By taking off the valve cap, right?
You can take off the valve cap. So we'll show you here. We take off the valve cap and we can apply the oil to that spindle right there. Can you see that in there?
Yeah, I can see that.
Then the other side. This is the one that gets really, really tricky, that everybody has a hard time with. It's the long side here. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, the underside of the horn, right?
So now we're going to go here. And since I have, this is called a stop arm here. Since I have the stop arm off on this one, I can show you exactly where we're aiming for. We're aiming right there. Okay? Down in this gap. Now,
there's usually a little like gap between it, right?
Yeah. And so if we show on this side, see if you can see this here, it would be here with the spindle, with the stop arm in place. We're just trying to sneak it right into there. All right.
Okay. Now, a lot of times the students that I talk to, that's the end of their oiling routine.
Yeah.
But all you've addressed so far is the spindles. Is that correct?
All we've talked about is the spindles. And for the most part, lunch, dinner, and breakfast doesn't get to that part.
Right.
Lunch, dinner, and breakfast is blowing right through the ports here. And if this port has no oil on it, lunch, dinner, and breakfast will stick right to the brass.
I see. So all that food that's still in your mouth and just even metal on metal, right? It's not going to move very well.
So if this was dry and then you played it for 3 hours and then you put it in its case and you had just eaten and now you let it sit overnight and you're going to be diligent and come right back the next day and practice, to adhere itself anywhere there is no oil. It will take the place of where the oil should be. If it was wet, nothing can stick. If that makes sense. Okay? It will continue to flush through the instrument. So how do we get it there? How do we get it to the spindle part? We get it there by dropping through the slide tubes like such. And this is why they make the needle with that long point, is that it gives you the opportunity to aim right for the rotor itself. Because if I'm dripping off to the side like this, remember I talked about the slide with the grit. All that grit went in here, and now if the oil goes down the side, it will pick up the grit and it will bring it into the side. So
and it'll break down the lanolin.
It'll break down the lanolin and all that stuff. So what we're trying to do is aim right for the middle so that we can get it like this. I don't know if you can see inside there.
Yeah.
You can see we're trying to get it into here, okay? And that is where the port is on that rotor, all right?
Great. So when you squeeze, do you give it one good squeeze? Do you think about like
a few drops?
Okay.
A few drops.
And do you think it's better to do it before you play for the day, or maybe if you're maintaining your horn regularly, doing it at the end of the day, so like you said, things won't stick overnight as the horn dries out?
I mean, in a perfect world, if you had enough oil to last you forever, before and after would be great. I try and push people to remember to oil after, specifically if they're going to take a break from the instrument. I mean, let's say you're not going to play till tomorrow or in 2 days or 1 day or whatever. That would be the perfect time to oil it, because then lunch, dinner, and breakfast, they just can't stick.
Right. So a lot of high school horn players often over breaks, they might not play, or they may be playing mellophone for a lot of the summer and marching season. Hopefully they're still getting their horns out, but
yes,
it's really important when the instrument's not being played to make sure that it's oiled ahead of time so that when they come back to it, everything works functionally.
Exactly. And if you do that, if you oil it before you let it sit, because I see it all the time where somebody's let it sit for a day or two, like you said, they started to play the mellophone and now they're like, my rotors will not move. And it's not, we're not just talking about, you know, a little gritty. We're talking about frozen solid, will not even rotate back and forth. So
okay, so let's say that oops, that happened.
Yep.
The best thing to do would be to get some oil down that slide, like you just
down
showed
the slide
us,
in both spots,
and just let it sit for a little while.
Let it sit for a while and see if it will break it down and go.
Okay.
And in that situation, probably a thinner oil would have its best ability, like an Alcast or something, because it's thinner, so it would fill up. It would find any gap it could and start to break everything down that's holding it in place. So
here's a question that I've always wanted to know. You know, I understand the difference between a synthetic oil and a non-synthetic, but I know I've been told never to mix the two because something bad will happen.
Yep.
What is it that happens when you mix the two types of oil? And how do I know if I have a synthetic or a non-synthetic oil?
Yeah, most oils like your Alcast and your Blue Juice and your things like that are a conventional oil. Your synthetics are normally your Hetmans, and Yamaha has moved into a synthetic. For the most part, pick one oil brand, stick with it, and continue on with that. But like I said before, it would be better. Some oil is better than no oil whatsoever. So if you're like, ooh, I'm not going to get oil for another 3 weeks, I guess I shouldn't oil at all. Borrowing somebody's oil is probably better. But
okay,
you do run the risk of getting gummy valves. That's what's going to happen.
So they react and kind of create like a thicker substance.
Yeah, you're mixing in your slide grease, a couple different valve oils or rotor oils, and lunch, dinner, and breakfast, and everything can start to get gummy.
Yeah,
the
it makes me think
what's
like
cool about the Hetman, it will
ahead.
mix with anything. It will mix with all conventional oils. That's why everybody recommends it, because I haven't seen any other brands. The Allison brands, I've seen some problems with some of that stuff. They're a synthetic product. Well, they will kind of make some gummy stuff, but the Hetman stuff, it's kind of expensive, but it's really, really good. So
okay. So this takes us through greasing and oiling. One thing you talked about food, but what about like how do we address food in the instrument once it's already happened, or is there something we can do to clean out the horn?
Yeah, disassembling a horn. If you're going to try and give your horn a bath, it is a ton of work. If you're really going to be willing to pull out all the rotors and you're going to try and give the whole thing a bath, if it's really that bad that you feel like you need to do that, take it to somebody, because you're going to put so much time into it and you're never going to get rid of the green stuff. You can't get rid of the green stuff with dish soap, and that's what everybody recommends. Give the horn a nice bath in warm water and use a snake. I'll show you a snake here in a minute. And that's great, but it's hours and hours of work. You're not going to be able to get rid of the green stuff that's stuck to the rotors. You're going to get rid of grease, but you won't get rid of the mineral deposits and those things. And you run the risk of not having the rotor work when you go to put it back together. Because it's a little tricky reassembling the rotor and putting the back bearing plate on and stuff like that. If you
I know, I would
never
do that myself.
And if you're going to try it, the worst time to try it would be when your repair technician is on vacation or
under quarantine.
Has just happened. Yeah, something like that. Don't do it then. If you know your repair tech is down the street, go for it and give it a shot.
So certainly snaking out the lead pipe is something that everybody should do on a regular basis, right?
It is. And I like these little guys. These are the Yamaha ones. I like it when it's coated in some sort of plastic.
Okay.
I don't like the metal ones. I don't like the idea of that thing going up.
Do you think it scrapes it or scratches it?
It does, and I just don't like that. So we would be better off. So we can see if we can get this up. But we could just use water in soap and water just through the lead pipe here, and we could just run the snake up through the lead pipe, and you're not going to hurt anything by doing that and pulling it out and at least getting some of that junk out of there.
Yeah, and now my routine is usually when I come in Monday morning, that's usually when I re-grease my slides and I snake out my lead pipe. So about once a week. So does that sound like a good amount of frequency?
It's a great idea. The other option is, and good luck getting brass players to do this, the other option is to buy a swab. Believe it or not,
swab.
They actually sell swabs for horns. Who knew, right? Good luck. Oboe players and
I did not know that.
Have been using them forever. Hodges, they're a silk swab company, Hodges, and they make great swabs for all instruments. And it is a little weighted metal bead, kind of like a chain on a light here.
Yeah, like a bassoon swab, I think.
Like a bassoon swab, and you can pull it through, and it's silk, and you can pull it through, and imagine that. Swab out your instrument. The same reason that all the woodwind players do it.
And that will keep all of that grit or food particles getting blown out of the lead pipe and into the main part of the horn.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. It would take retraining and rethinking by every brass player out there, but it could be done.
I mean, that's, actually, it's the first I've heard of that as a possibility, and I could see why that would really benefit the instrument. So one thing I want to emphasize for our audience is how maintaining your instrument well isn't just about, making it look pretty or whatever. It's actually about keeping it playing well, because oiling it, greasing it, keeping all that food and stuff out of it, it's going to resonate better. It's going to play more the way we want it to play with more ease.
Yeah, and everything we've talked about, we're talking about the bore of the instrument, the inside of the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
We're really not that concerned about the outside, because the bore is what's going to affect the sound and the playability of the instrument.
Okay.
And the buildup, I mean, we're talking about food buildup inside of your bore, and it's hard to see on a horn because the pipe, but it has a lead pipe. You pull up the tuning slide and you look through, and you've easily got 3-4 thousandths worth of gunk inside the bore of the instrument. And I think the difference between a large bore and a medium bore instrument is only like a thousandth of an inch. So it will make huge effects of all that stuff when it all, this one's actually a little thing, but when it all gets built up inside of the instrument.
And sometimes when you pull out your tuning slides, you can see, and and I've seen it in student instruments, you see all that gunk in there. So at that point, if I see that gunk in there, I'm going, okay, this needs to go for a thorough cleaning at the repair person's shop.
It has to. There is no way you're ever going to get it out of there. Soap and water is not. Soap and water and this nice little soft little nylon brush is never going to get that out of there, because it's stuck. It has adhered itself to the instrument. So.
Okay. Now, how often so maybe that's okay, I know I need to today, but then after I get it done today, and then I maintain it properly, how often should I be taking it into a repair person for maintenance? Somewhere
between a year and 2 years, I would say, to get it cleaned out once in a while. A lot of that is dependent upon how well you oil. It's kind of like how well you brush your teeth, whether or not you should have gone to the dentist or not. It's the exact same.
That's a really good comparison. I mean, it's the exact same idea. It's like plaque buildup. And however much you build up on is how much work they're going to have to do.
That's right.
Once it's there. Okay. So speaking of the outside of the instrument, can you talk a little bit about lacquer versus unlacquer? Is there any difference in how you would care for an instrument?
Yeah. There's a reason manufacturers put lacquer on instruments is because brass by itself will tarnish and oxidize, and we can give it a fancy word called patina. So if you look at this guy here, this is a Yamaha. I mean, at one point, this was all shiny, right? This was all shiny, and then we spray a clear coat over it. So you can see the spots that are shiny, that's where the lacquer still is, and where it's dark is where there was no lacquer and the instrument oxidized. There's benefits to no lacquer. A lot of players feel that that will be the most resonant that the instrument can be because there's nothing attached to it.
Right.
But the negative of it is the oxidation, and if you were wearing a white dress and you were trying to play your instrument, and now you're going to get green all over yourself because that's going to happen. You need to wipe it down often. A lot of players with unlacquered instruments will put car wax on their instrument to try and put a protection between them and it.
Car wax?
Yeah, like a Carnauba car wax, no different.
Okay.
Just to try and make some sort of barrier between you and it. Other options are to constantly wipe it down. But once it's become this color, the only way to get it back would be to polish it.
Okay.
If you want to do that yourself or not, that creates its own issues because you worry about that polish making its way into the rotor casing, and then you're quickly lapping the valves up, which you don't want to do. So
is that really more of a cosmetic thing to make sure
it's totally a cosmetic
it doesn't change the sound if the color starts to turn a darker color?
It's 100% cosmetic. A lot of times people associate a dark looking instrument with a dark sound. I believe it's actually the opposite. I think it's actually, we hate the word bright, so I'll use the word resonant. Bright means shrill, resonant means good. I think it makes a more resonant instrument without any finish on it.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree with you. A lot of schools tend to buy lacquered instruments, I think, because it helps to maintain just scratches and things like that on the instrument. Okay, so that's really helpful to know. Can you talk about something that I remember being told at some point, that it was a good idea to put the yellow colored Listerine in my horn, that would help clean it out. Is that true, or is that not helpful at all?
I don't have any experience with it. I would say that it could possibly, I mean, we're living in this new world where we're worrying about disinfecting. I think we could do what we just did here, which is remove the tuning slide so that we don't continue on, and we could just focus on the lead pipe and could possibly just do it in there. Is it going to hurt it? No, specifically if you rinse it out afterwards.
Okay, so putting a little bit of yellow Listerine, or I've heard of people using vodka as well to just clean out any bacteria, or obviously viral stuff is an issue right now.
And rubbing alcohol is the big thing right now. And that's what most mouthpiece sprays are made out of. So you see these, you know, the band director with a little green minty box, that's mint flavored rubbing alcohol from the drugstore. It's the same. It's the same thing that's in the hand sanitizer that everybody's using right now. That will work. And I think if you rinsed it out afterwards, it wouldn't hurt it at all. Clearly, you know, the mouthpiece and the mouthpiece brush would be a great idea. Once again, when we're talking about bores and buildup inside the bore, everybody's walking around with a dented end to their horn mouthpiece. And if you want your horn to play better, get that straightened out.
Yeah. And that comes from a lot of times people drop their mouthpiece, and then
that's what happens.
Yeah.
And then it gets stuck in the instrument. So
we want to maintain the round integrity of that, of the bore of the mouthpiece. And obviously the same issue with gunk building up.
That's
and
exactly right.
You know, our lips have skin on them, and skin sheds. So a lot of times there's buildup of not just food, but skin particles as well.
Yep. So
that should get cleaned often too.
If you saw the mouthpieces that I'd see, it's disgusting. So you have to,
imagine.
You have to clean them up. A mouthpiece brush and one of these would be are great items to do. And if you get this early and often, just soap and water will clean it out. There again, if you look inside the thing and it's like, whoa, just take it to a repair person ask them to clean it out for you.
I've even used it, a Q-tip inside my
Sure.
mouthpiece too.
A
Like
Q-tip
if
will work
I
great.
lost my brush or I couldn't
Yep.
find it, but it
Yep.
has to be wet. I've noticed that if my mouthpiece is dry, like I just got out of the case, it won't work. It won't pull anything out. So I usually have to soak it a little bit first to loosen up those particles.
That's right. And the more often you do it, the less issues you're going to have. Once a week on that would be a good thing,
Okay.
or even more often would be great, especially with the world we're dealing in now. It's probably better to do it more often, and soap and water would be fine if you did it every couple days. So
Okay.
yeah.
Thanks. That's really good advice.
Yeah.
So in terms of, here's a question for you. What is the difference between when I take my horn in to get an ultrasonic cleaning or a chemical cleaning?
Yeah. So back in, when did it do this? This was like mid 90s, late 90s. Wayne Tanabe, he's a great brass technician. He used to be in Chicago back in the day, and he started out with this push towards ultrasonic cleaners. And his idea was actually, what he was after was the bottom of trombone slides, the outer slide of a trombone, the bottom front. That's what he was trying to get that cleaned out, and trying to get away from some of the nasty chemicals that we in my industry use. And he really started to push that. And there are a lot of people that have great success with those ultrasonic cleaners. It's the same idea of well, maybe people don't go to the mall anymore, but you just go to the mall and they'd have a little cleaner in the jewelry store and they could clean your ring for you. It's the same idea. It's just a massive tank. Some of these guys have humongous tanks where they can fit an entire sousaphone down inside that thing. And these units cost $20,000, $30,000.
Wow.
So they got a lot of money into them. There are still those of us who do it the old-fashioned way with elbow grease, and I can accomplish what they accomplish. It just takes me a lot longer. The other reason they like it is how quick it is, because it's literally down and up and reassemble. My process takes a little bit longer. They're both effective. Ultrasonic cleaning isn't the end-all be-all. I still see people having to use chemicals after the ultrasonic cleaner to really get it clean. Also negatives of where people were having holes now in their instruments because the thing was so effective that it
opened up a weak place.
Yeah, and the particles that were closing things are now popping out of the instrument.
Oh my gosh.
Because of that. But that's, I wouldn't be worried
about that.
Either one is
case.
That's an extreme case. Either one is effective. If you've got a good repair technician, either one is really, really effective. Big cleaners, just because of speed. So, okay.
So, what difference does it make if I dent my horn? I think a lot of people, a lot of student instruments I have seen have a lot of dents in them, and I think that maybe there's not an awareness for what impact that can have on the sound of the instrument.
Sure. As with most things with wind instruments, the closer to your mouth, the bigger effect you're going to have on your sound. So if that's your mouthpiece, if that's your lead pipe, the closer you are, the bigger that's going to have. So if we're getting dents up into our lead pipe, into this area up in here, those are going to have huge effects. Now, as we move farther out into the bell, it's debatable. I would love to do a test and have two exact instruments and put a dent in it and see if anybody can tell the difference. I will say this, once we're starting pushing past a quarter into the bore, we're going to really start affecting things. But for sure, anywhere into here, it's going to greatly, you're creating a choke, right? A small choke and then a venturi back out. And that's going to affect resistance. It's going to affect how the instrument sounds, and it's going to affect a lot of stuff. So
if we think of sound waves as, bouncing against each side of the tube, and then, this part of the tube is a different shape,
right.
It's going to mess with that, with how the sound wave reacts.
Absolutely. And here's a question for you I can ask. So why do we all, and Grace's is pretty good. She's got a few here. Why in here
Why is it always right there?
Why are the dents always right in here? Is it the chair? Is it the, I don't understand what
I think it's probably from walking with the instrument. If you have it under your arm, maybe, that, you know, maybe that would bang into things more easily.
I can go through all
I'm
of our
not
tech
sure.
class instruments and they all have dents in the same spot. So I'm always curious as to what that is.
The other thought that I have, and this is something I tell all of my students, is okay, first of all, the best way to avoid dents is to never put your horn down and walk away from
Ever.
it. Okay.
Ever. Don't put it on a chair. Ever.
Right. So certainly during rehearsals, but a lot of times they'll set their horn down just even in the practice room to like go get something or whatever. And I think they set it down where they oh, my arm looks weird because that screen. They set it down on the, like that part of the horn and then sort of slide it down onto the backside.
Yeah.
And if I have to set my horn down, I actually always set it on the front side of the horn.
Absolutely.
With the like where the keys are. So the keys are on the surface, usually the ground in my very safe space office, not a chair, like you said, because that side is less sensitive. If I were to get a dent along the lead pipe on the back side, that's going to make a bigger problem for me.
If I had a preference, it would always be have your case off to the side and put your instrument in its case. If I had another choice, it would be, believe it or not, on the ground. I think the worst, and everybody's like, well, what if somebody steps on it? I would prefer that over the chair because it doesn't fit on the chair. The bell does not fit. It's just barely hanging there, and then it's going to boom and hit the ground. It's worst case scenario.
Yeah, one time when I was a high school student, I had just had the bell cut on my horn and a whole bunch of maintenance done, and I was sitting in a rehearsal and I took my mouthpiece off so that it wouldn't fall out as I emptied my horn, and I set it on my music stand. And here I am, I've turned my horn over, I'm emptying it out, and the mouthpiece starts to roll. So I go to grab it and down falls my horn. It landed on the lead pipe. And then it bounced, flipped over, and landed on the bell. I was devastated. But it's so much more forceful for an instrument to drop. And my understanding is it shifts everything in the instrument. Like it's kind of like a whiplash after a car accident. Maybe you don't see exactly what happens, but all those braces, all those things in the horn.
In a car accident, it's kind of like where your frame is bent and you can't quite see it. The outside of the body looks fine, but the whole car is going down the road sideways because the whole frame has been forcefully adjusted. And that's what happens when you drop it from this amount of distance. So,
So, just for fun, what's the strangest thing you've encountered in a horn or, I don't know, another brass instrument?
If we're going to just say specifically brass instruments, the strangest thing would be dead mouse inside of a sousaphone.
Oh, gross. I feel like that's an urban legend. You've actually encountered that?
Absolutely. If you think about it, we live in corn country, right? I mean, I've got corn all the way around me, and you've got these small farm schools. This is when I lived in Champaign, and they hang the sousaphone up on the wall, right? And they hang it up on the wall, and then they're gone for the summer or whatever. And the mouse will work its way down in there, and it maybe of old age, or maybe it was poisoned. They picked up poison someplace else. And we had a dead mouse come out of the carcass. So that was one of the nasty ones. Another thing that I see a lot of are pen caps getting stuck down inside of instruments.
Oh my gosh.
These are pro players, good players that have a pen inside their case, and the cap has worked its way, and then that cap will make its way down on the bell, and it will get jammed up inside of the instrument somewhere.
So don't keep anything in your case is the answer to that.
Anything that's that small that can work its way down into the bore, it will happen. It will work its way in.
Right.
And sometimes
pencils that happening too.
Yeah, sometimes you think that it can't make its way out of that extra compartment, but sometimes there's space enough there where you're walking around and things will shuffle all the way through, and this is a big catch-all, and it will work its way inside of there. You'll know pretty quickly.
Yeah, that's true. And that's the benefit maybe of like a cut bell style case is they tend to be wedged in pretty tightly. So maybe that doesn't happen as often.
That's right.
So I would just like to summarize for everyone watching the basic maintenance that we talked about, and just jump in if there's anything I forget.
Sure.
So once a year, we need to take the horn in for a chemical or ultrasonic cleaning.
Year to 2 years.
1 year to 2 years?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to maintain the slides. We need to grease them and, make sure they move in and out easily once a week, maybe 2 weeks if we're not taking them in and out. In fact, I do my back slides, the main tuning slides, more often because I'm frequently emptying them for water.
Yep.
At the same time, I tend to clean out my mouthpiece and my lead pipe with a snake.
Yep.
And then every day, ideally before and after practicing, we should get some oil down the valve tubes into directly into the rotor.
Yep.
Ideally,
and on both spindle sides, just a drop or two.
Okay. That would be ideal to do at the beginning and end of a practice day, but if we had to, at least once a day would.
Yes.
And I'll tell you, everyone I say that to, students, they look at me like I'm crazy because I'll ask them, when was the last time you oiled your valves? And they're like, I don't know. And so I feel like it's very important for people to hear that valves need to be oiled every single day in order to play well and make sure that food particles don't, glom on and stick there forever.
I'm going to add one little thing to that. Sometimes part of the reason that nobody oils on this side is because they can't get the cap off.
Oh.
And a good little trick to that is if you take the cap off and if you take your little grease and you take a smidge of grease and if you put it on the threads here.
Okay.
And then when you put it back, now your cap will come off when you want it to. Just like your slide will move out.
Yeah.
I get lots of marching band instruments from the university where I can't even pull the rotor or the valves out because the top cap's stuck on, and that tells me I haven't oiled the instrument once the whole time. There's no way to oil it if you can't get the cap off. So
well, now you can send them this video when they check out an instrument.
That's right. That's right. So
okay, is there anything else that you want to add to our conversation today?
I think that's it. I think we covered all the basic stuff.
Clean your mouth out. I skipped to say that.
Oh yeah, that's the first one. If everybody could start doing that, people would go to work. But we'll see.
Well, they still drop their instruments like I did when I was a young player.
Right, but the best thing you can do is rinse your mouth out.
So. Okay, well, thank you very much for your time today. Thanks again for watching, and thank you, Chad, for all that super helpful information. We'll be back on the hour with a session on performance anxiety by WIU Horn Studio alum Robert Palmer. The 2020 Western Horn Festival is offered free to the public. If you would like to make a donation to support students facing unexpected hardship due to COVID-19, text WIU CARE to the number 41444.